Good morning. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, this week we're going to have words of hope that both talk about Joshua. Joshua was the guy who lived under Moses' shadow, but he was faithful in what he did. And we're going to take a look at an early chapter today and then a little bit later chapter. But I think he's someone we can aspire to be like, because he's kind of like a normal kind of guy. So he was one of the 12 spies that was sent into the Promised Land to check it out, to see what it was all about. And so let's go back to Apollo 13. If you've never seen the movie or know the story, we've got these astronauts that are out in space, this tin can that's floating around, and everything is going wrong. And it's not like you can just get supplies to them. It's a fascinating story because their spacecraft is broken down. And you can't just go out and change the tire. They're in trouble. And great scene in the movie, one of the NASA directors who's there at Mission Control, played by Ed Harris, he hears a couple of guys like, we don't want any part of this. This is going to be a mess. And he said, with all due respect, I believe this could be NASA's finest hour. And I love people who have that kind of attitude when things are going wrong. It's easy to think that when you're winning Stanley Cups, when you're winning championships, when everything's going great. But when you have that perspective when everything's going wrong, well, Joshua and Caleb were people that always kind of felt that way, saw it that way. In Numbers chapter 13, verse 30, they'd spied out the land, and their response was, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are able to overcome it. Not in their own power. See, they all went up and they all saw the same land. They saw the same fruit. As a matter of fact, they came out of there with huge clusters of grapes, pomegranates, figs, as proof of the land's fertility. But this is where the similarity ended. 10 of the spies added, however, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. Where's their focus? On God? Not exactly. On problems. We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. And so far they haven't mentioned God. The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw there are of great height. We seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. That's such a powerful line. When you're intimidated by other people, then they get that you're intimidated. So they all saw the same thing. Joshua and Caleb weren't like, oh, no way, man, you guys are wrong. You saw it all wrong. No, they saw the same thing, but Caleb said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Why? Because they saw what God was able to do. When they focused on God, then the giants shrank to manageable proportions, okay? We are able to overcome it, not in our own strength, but God's strength. So who are the people going to believe? You got 2 with a good report, 10 with a bad report. Folks, this is leadership right here. And we need to be wise who we choose as leaders. People that give a good report or people who give the realistic report. Okay? So they go with the majority report. Forget God. We're going to go with the majority of the people say, this is no good. Well, this was a tragedy. This was a real tragedy. Because the people of that generation never did get to the Promised Land except Joshua and Caleb. We're going to talk about Joshua on Thursday this week. But they made it because their focus was on God. And even though it got delayed because of the disobedience of some other people and because of what they didn't believe, they still made it there. There's a watershed moment, there's a tragic one, but it's a great moment for Joshua and Caleb. They stood for God, they stood for God's promises, and they were still operating the same way 40 years later. In the end, the only thing that really matters in the long run is trusting God and then doing what He says. Receive His grace today, but trust Him and do what He says. And don't go with the majority report. Go with God's report. God bless you. Have a great day.